Hey, welcome to this episode of The Complete Advisor. So excited you're here. We're going to talk about niche marketing. And one, how do you find a niche? How do you get there, the path that leads you there? And then, in a way, what keeps you there in that niche, and then also what keeps your competition out of that niche. So that's what we're going to talk about today on this episode. And today I am joined by Stuart Hunsicker. Stuart, welcome.
Thank you.
And then Zar Razak. Zar, welcome, sir.
Thank you, sir.
And you fellas out of the Carolinas, or should I just say Carolina?
Carolina's good.
Yeah. Carolina. And you focus on the federal market. Mm-hmm. But the route that you got there I find interesting. And before I go any further, I do want to point out a sponsorship, Diet Coke. They don't sponsor us. I sponsor them with my dollars. So I just Diet Coke and Coca-Cola, if you're listening right here, we'd love a sponsorship deal. But let's talk about the financial market and how you got there, because as I was doing some background on you guys, I found it fascinating what led you there. And tell us first a little bit about yourself. So, Zar, you're first. You're over on the left, stage right.
All right. So what do you need? I mean, as far as how long I've been doing this in the market? Tell me. Well, 2011, I started peddling life insurance door to door, man. Just like
door to door.
Yeah. Drank the Kool-Aid. Hire a bunch of guys and have them all sell one policy, and you live fat and happy and be rich, right? And it didn't work out that way.
Yeah.
Eventually, it did morph into, with different IMOs, I became what was the Sherpa for the annuities. So the IMOs, they would go out, their agents would, meet with their clients for final expense or whole life policies or whatever. We would train them on how to uncover dollars.
Yeah.
And then I would come in and present an annuity on how to do that. Mm-hmm. So flash forward now, life is going okay. Pretty much one-man show, but everything is going good. Financially, life, it's fine. And then about 2020, a gentleman who I've known for a long time invited me to join an IMO that primarily focused on the school system, on 403Bs and things like that. So I said, all right. So I jumped into that and did okay. But in North Carolina, where I'm at, unfortunately, teachers aren't very highly compensated. Not a lot of them have a lot of savings and things like that. So it wasn't as it didn't generate the income I needed.
It's a long-term game.
Yeah, I helped a lot of people, which was great.
Yeah.
But and money's not my biggest motivator today. But I still need to make a living, right?
Sure.
I have to pay bills. So at the end of 2020, I decided I was going to pull back out and focus more back into what I was doing before I joined that IMO. And that's where Stuart and I had met in that IMO and doing the school system stuff. And then when I pulled away, he was looking to pull away around the same time, and we started collaborating a little bit and figured out that where he's lacking, I'm good at. Where I'm lacking, he's good at. So the partnership developed after that, and for the last 2.5, 3 years, we've built it to where it is.
A little yin and yang. So before we get to you, Stuart, there's two things we have in common. I didn't know you did door-to-door, because I was at a wirehouse, and one of the things that they would do is they'd have you go door-to-door, which is a great way to meet people, also terrifying.
Oh, yeah.
I always thought of, like, when I would get out, to get out of the car was a hostage negotiation with myself. But the one thing, since we have this kindred spirit here, they say the percentage of hoarders in America is this small number. And from going door to door, I do not believe that.
Oh, no.
I think the percentage of hoarders in this country is much, much higher.
Oh, yeah. It did help me also get over my fear of dogs.
No.
Yeah. Because there was some situation where I walked into and all of a sudden, there's a Rottweiler sitting there. It's like, okay, all right, I'm going to deal with this, and motor on through it. So, I'm still a little fearful of that. I don't know if it helped or hurt, though, because, but yeah. No, it was a great experience. And cold calling, just getting to be a little bit more confident in myself, because it does take a lot, picking up the phone and calling people after they've been called, 15 times, and you're number 16, you're getting yelled at because you're that guy, that 1,000-pound phone, weighs 1,000 pounds. So, that helped me a lot.
The one side effect from door knocking that hopefully anybody with kids doesn't hear this, but any kid that comes and knocks on the door, I'm buying. Just because that I can't
yeah.
believe they're out. I know how hard it is to go knock on a door
yeah.
and give your sales pitch. I'm like, I make them give me the pitch. I want to hear it.
Yeah.
But then, okay, let's grab some cash.
Absolutely. That, and I'm a sucker for coming out of the hardware store to grocery store, and the Girl Scouts are there, and they're like, yeah.
That is tough.
Even if you already have the car full of Girl Scout cookies?
I tend to buy 1 or 2 boxes, and I always blame it on my kids. Hey, my little one, he has a peanut, tree nut, and egg allergy, so I lead with that. What do you have? Peanut, tree nuts, and eggs, and they're like, oh, we've got this, and this. I'm like, all right, give me 2 boxes.
Nice.
Now we're good. So
I don't. You know what I do? So we've totally gone off the rails here, but I will buy anything if the kid pitches me.
Yeah.
But if I don't, if it's coming and it's like, hey, my kid's selling this, I'm like, well, your son or daughter, I need to hear it from them. I need the sales pitch, and then I'll buy.
I like though. What are you saving it for? Right? What's your goal with this? Because I want them to tell me.
Yeah.
Because like a lot of them, it's like I'm saving for this, or I want to buy this. You go drive through the neighborhood, and they've got their lemonade stand or whatever.
Yeah.
And usually it's like I don't want the lemonade, but what do you say? What are you selling lemonade for? It's like, I want to buy a new blah, blah, blah. It's like, all right, cool. Here's $5. Motor on.
Yeah.
So.
You've got money in your pocket and I need it in mine. Okay. So, all right, Stuart, we already went off the rails, but so tell me a little bit about you and then how did you two, I know how you connected, but tell us more.
Yeah, so I started kind of the opposite direction. I was a securities principal for my first 7 years in the industry and managed about $400 million in portfolios for the firm I worked with.
Nice.
And, I was in my 20s, and then the housing bubble exploded. And for 2 years, I took all of the phone calls from our clients crying on the phone of, hey, what do I do, right? And I'm like, I don't know, I'm 25. I can tell you what the textbook says, right?
Yeah.
And then in 2008, my dad actually passed away. I decided to make a change and go into more of the try personal production out. I had a little partnership there because I didn't know the insurance side, so I partnered with an insurance guy, and it didn't work. And so I actually made a complete career change. You mentioned the door-to-door. I did door-to-door sales for Comcast and Xfinity for 4 years. And you learn a lot of interesting things to say at the door to get your 20-second pitch in. And I might agree on the hoarder thing, right?
I'm telling you.
It's definitely interesting. But you learn to you learn more about people. I'll tell you, I took a lot about sales away from that, like learning, I started, even today, when I meet with clients, I put myself on their side of the table. Like, what is important? And so I learned a lot of things about that. But I owned a State Farm agency. One thing I did find is all the houses I went into, people were like, why are you here selling cable? You made the wrong switch. Go back to what you were doing. So I wasn't good at cable, I guess. I don't know. But I ended up getting back into insurance through the State Farm side. Learned P&C wasn't my thing. I really liked more of the investments and
that's just a commodity. Anyway.
Yeah, it is. It was very much a commodity. And COVID kind of hit. Same time, I ended up at a appreciation that he was mentioned. We'd working in the 403B space, and it was a good learning experience because I hadn't had any exposure at all to virtual.
Yeah.
And that's actually how I ended up there. Is like the door-to-door things. People all of a sudden, you go to somebody's house and that you set a meeting with, and they're like, "Hey, we're not seeing people. COVID's." And I'm like, "I just talked to you this morning, right?"
COVID was definitely a crash course across this country. People like an immediate. Everyone got a course in Zoom.
Yeah. And so went over there, learned how to. Took a few weeks to learn how to do virtual meetings, right? Because I was the living room guy, I think, like Zar, and we had some success early. I think Zar was the same way. They big on training over there, bringing in other people and training them up. And so I'm kind of the numbers guy, but I could talk to the engineers pretty easily, but sometimes I'd lack a little bit on the ones that don't want the numbers. They want the touchy-feely. Zar's more of the touchy-feely kind of guy. So we did some joint cases over there together. And then I think both of us around the same time got tired of training people and decided to kind of go back on our own. And like you said, we were both kind of looking to make a change at the same time. Reached out to him and was like, hey, let's talk this out, because the things that I like to do and enjoy in the industry are things that he's not as pro on, and vice versa. He likes to do the stuff I don't like to do. So it works really well with us.
Good yin and yang.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's how we kind of got started on that side. And I think both of us have gotten very good at doing the virtual meetings, so much that it's about 95% of our business now.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
It does. It is so much more convenient because the days of hopping in a car and driving across town and or wherever the appointment is, not just for you but for the client to have to sometimes I look at that and I don't live that far from the office, but if you forget something, it's like, oh, that's 20 minutes, or I don't have to park and then I have to walk over, and it sounds incredibly lazy, but it's still sometimes you're like, but it's 20 minutes there and it's 20 minutes back and traffic and that. So you were working first with teachers, which, bless your hearts, they are underpaid. They are. I don't know. To me, I spent we were talking before, and I mentioned that I spent some time in the teacher's lounge, which to me felt like herding cats. No disrespect. I have a sister-in-law that is a teacher, and she's been an educator forever. But man, being an advisor in the teacher's lounge, for me, it felt like being back in like sixth grade as the unpopular kid sitting at the wrong table. So we were talking about how the teachers, and then especially we were talking about people who are divorced. And then the neighborhood where you guys are at, there is a lot of federal employees.
Yeah, so what we run into, so my wife's a teacher, and I'm actually live in Richmond, Virginia, even though our office is in North Carolina. That, again, virtual, right? And so one of the demographics that we worked with where teachers did actually have a little bit of money was in Northern Virginia. And what we found, it was really odd. We'd start to talk to them about, do you understand how the pensions work? Because none of them did. And we'd kind of go through that, and it seemed like 70% of them are married to federal employees. And I had done a little bit of time working with postal workers in the past, so I knew enough to be dangerous in there.
Yeah.
But it led us down the path where it was kind of like, hey, Zar, we should probably learn the federal stuff pretty good to be able to really help the family as a whole. And so I really, I dove in and got a couple of designations in it, spent a lot of time studying it because I like that side, that research and development. And then it became kind of our bread and butter. The federal employees don't get a whole lot of, when they're onboarded, they don't really get a lot of information.
Yeah.
And so they plug along, and sometimes they're 10, 15 years in their career, and the only information they know about their benefits is what they've heard at the water cooler.
Yeah.
So it's kind of been evolved in that space. We still, have a little passion for the teachers because, we both started there and they need help.
Sure.
So we do a lot of that work, but most of that stuff's kind of pro bono help.
That's
right?
what I was just going to say.
So the federal thing wasn't something that we intentionally went after. It just kind of morphed into that.
Yeah. So this niche starts with, oh, wait a second, you're working K through 12, and then you're probably, like you were just saying, you're finding that the ones who are married to federal employees, there's more like, oh, there's assets over here versus Miss Claire and her cat. That is a terrible stereotype, but it's probably true.
Right.
But there's the play of going this way with the educator, that you're playing the long game, or you're going this way.
Yeah. So it was. It was just out of necessity because a lot of the teachers. They would ask, their significant other, whoever is in the federal space, they're listening to the virtual call as we're doing with the teacher, and something strikes them, and they're like, hey, can we talk about something like that for me? Or so that's where it kind of morphed into.
So now when you look at your book of business and how you proceed, the focus now is federal employees.
Yeah, about 95% of our marketing is with federal employees. We do some teachers, mainly in that Northern Virginia area. The pensions in Virginia for the teachers are very, very similar to the federal pension.
Okay.
So it's an easy,
it's an affinity.
You don't have to really learn a whole lot of new stuff.
North Carolina's not like that.
Yeah. And in Northern Virginia, in Fairfax County specifically, they have two pensions. The teachers actually get two of them. And they're insanely confusing, and even HR there doesn't understand them. So we've got a pretty big referral network in there. And when we have some gaps in our calendar to fill, I just reach out to a few of our clients and be like, "Hey, who in the school hasn't done one of these reviews yet?" And and then my calendar fills up quickly. And it's really just about getting them to understand where they're at and where they want to be, and they kind of. Even you mentioned being in the lunchrooms because that was before COVID, right? You'd come in. Sit in the
plate of cookies, sit in the teacher's lounge.
Yeah, teacher's lounge, cafeteria, right? Hey, come in, sign up for your 403B. And what we found in COVID when we would start talking about a plan for them and explaining how the pension worked is we'd say, hey, you're doing this 403B. how much you saving? And it'd be like $100 a month. And where'd you come up with that number? I don't know. Johnny said I should do $100 a month, right? And so we realized that they really didn't have an understanding of like what their goals were and how to get there. And so that's really how we focused our entire practice, whether it's federal teachers. It all starts with what's your goal? Where are you now? And, trying to help them get there.
So what, so Zar, I'll ask you this. What's different about federal employees than the rest of us civilians? Is there anything unique that sits over there? I mean, besides the plan itself?
The TSP and stuff? No, I think, at the end of the day, they all have concerns, you know. I think probably the biggest difference with the federal employees is I don't think as many people work in corporate America understands the importance of a 401k or putting something aside, right? I think one of the kudos I'm going to say to the federal system is I don't, they all get a match, but almost every single person we've spoken to is also participating above that match, right? Where I don't see that a lot with, corporate America, or they're putting in the minimum. They don't quite.
You think it's a different mindset?
Yeah, I think it is. I don't know. I think part of that, it's like way back when I grew up in Florida, and it was, get a job at Disney because they've got all these benefits that you're going to get, right? And it wasn't necessarily the money. So I think the mindset of a federal employee going into it is you're going to have this Mac Daddy pension, and you're going to have TSP, and blah blah blah, and they're going into it with that intention of if I do this, this, and this is going to be the outcome. Whereas corporate America, nobody's giving pensions anymore in corporate America.
Exactly.
Right? So it's and your 401k, the one pitch you get, once a year from the guy, you get a letter that says, do you want to be aggressive, conservative, or moderate?
Yeah.
And people don't understand what that means. So I don't think they get it. So I think that's probably the big difference.
So there's already right from the get-go, the population of employees it does have a different mindset.
Yeah.
Well, they all to your point, they all contribute to the TSP. In the educational space, most of the 403Bs don't have a match. So
they don't.
10% of the teachers actually contribute to it. It's very poorly utilized throughout the country.
They do a terrible job. I mean, I'll use North Carolina for example. I think this lack of you don't know what you don't know, right? Like I mean, I've met teachers who've worked for 10 years, and I'll ask them, "Are you familiar with Orbitz?" Orbitz is their state retirement where they can go and they can log in and see how much their pension is going to be and run projections. Say, if I retire at this age, here's what it's going to look like. 10 years they've been working. It's like what is Orbit? And it's like, really? You don't know what this is? So it's like not knowing, and they all think somewhere in the head, that especially teachers, I'm making $50,000 a year when I retire because I'm going to make $50,000 a year, and they don't understand. No, you're going to make like 20. That's the reason for the 403B or doing something supplemental, and they don't get that, And it's astonishing the shock that I get from somebody who's been teaching for 10 years, and when I run that pension, like, that's it, Federal employees now, it's hugely different. I mean, we've got lots of federal employees that I'm floored that it's like, holy cow, you're making almost what you were making when you were working, with the pension and all that stuff, But I think to go back to your question, I think there's a little difference in all of them, and it's lack of education, man. It's what you don't know, you don't know.
Do you guys so you've niched now totally into with the federal employees? Do you find more? Do you find yourself working in specific would it be departments?
No,
just across the board.
Yeah,
it's really strange. I mean, we'll get appointments with people that are in departments I didn't even know existed. I mean, lots of them.
We were talking about that before.
Like, we have a beekeeper that's a client, and it's like, the federal government pays for you to do that?
Yeah,
bees are important.
Well, I had somebody ask, because I told them we had a beekeeper as a client, and they were like, do you go to jail if you kill one of the bees? Is that
this
a
is
federal
true.
offense, right?
I have had some appointments get put on my calendar that that I'm a little nervous going into. We've had a couple of SEC employees that I've met with, several IRS agents.
Yeah.
And
We're good though, so I don't think we have anything to be fearful of, right?
Accidentally say something, and
I've thought about we have I think a FINRA office here in town. I thought it'd be pretty cool to have somebody on, but then it's like, is that poking the bear? Because I'm registered, so.
Yeah, it makes me nervous, but it's funny because the ones in really the SEC is a big one. Mm-hmm. They are very restricted on like what they're allowed to do in their own portfolios, and so
makes sense. Yeah,
it's really our conversations with them are about, hey, when you retire, I can actually give you some ideas on what to do, right? But until then, you have to do this, right? So it's sort of interesting. They do have really good benefits, and so there's. It is mostly the retiree phase that we're working with there because their benefits are so strong.
Sure.
But you mentioned earlier, the divorce situation.
Yeah.
And, part of that comes down to, and we saw this on the teacher side, married to or getting divorced from the federal employee, and now on, the opposite side, right? But I'm stunned by how many divorce attorneys don't understand pensions and don't, honestly, they leave a lot of stuff on the table for their client, right? I meet with federal employees all the time, and they're like, hey, I was married for 30 years. I got divorced 5 years ago. And I'm like, okay, how much of your pension's going to your ex? And they're like, none. And I'm like, how? And their answers, it never came up in conversation. And I'm like, wow, she had a bad attorney.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, that sort of dumbfounds me a little bit. But we'd see it on the, educator side too. It's almost like, hey, this is a bad experience. So as quickly as we can separate this, get this divorce done, like they almost don't really care where the chips falls in some cases. And so it's a little, I don't know, it's a little disturbing, especially if if your client's on the bad end of that deal and like, hey, you too bad this is done.
You left this behind.
Right?
Yeah, so it's not like Social Security where they can get, which most people don't even realize that, but where you're going to get whatever the number is, but it doesn't affect the other person. This actually would be, taking a little bite out of.
Yeah. Well, in some cases, a big bite, right? Like, because technically, if they were married for a long time, they're entitled to the portion of the pension for the years they were married. And then, probably a good chunk of the TSP. Now I've seen cases where they're like, okay, he keeps the 401k, I'm keeping my TSP. That makes sense, right? I've seen one where it was, hey, you're keeping the house and I'm keeping my account, right? And those make sense, right? But the pensions seem to get lost in the dark. I also have had some cases where the attorney literally got a judge to do orders for things that couldn't be done. And you're like, well, you can't actually do that with that account. So we're gonna have to figure out a different way to solve it. We actually have a client that became a bigger client because she had a funky situation where the judge said something that we physically couldn't make happen.
Yeah.
And the new husband, of course, wanted us to explain it to him. Well, now he's a client as well, so that kind of worked out well. But
probably the funniest one for divorce stuff is, when it's going to happen, right? Because they start asking questions. Like there was one client we were talking to. And
is this like on Facebook when someone starts posting those things, those vague things of like, no matter what obstacle will be there, I'll get through it. Like, oh man, they're getting divorced.
Exactly.
We know half the time because they're like, hey, I don't want my spouse in this conversation, or do we have to use my spouse's info? And I'm like, well, why wouldn't you? Aren't you going to retire under the same?
Yeah, there was one of them where specifically I was talking to her and she's just asking, and it was just like, and I finally just said, "Are you getting a divorce?" And she goes, "Yes, my daughter doesn't know yet, though." So I was like, "Okay, no big deal." So
when that happens with clients that you have that are existing, how often do you think you keep both, or does somebody leave?
We haven't had any.
I'd say it depends on whether we're on the front end or back end of it.
Yeah.
If we're finding out after the fact, one of them is going to leave because they probably
you're
already talked to somebody. Right?
Yeah.
If we're on the front end of it and we can maybe help make it easier on both of them, then we usually keep them both.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
I don't think we've had any.
We haven't had many.
Yeah.
But
and they're not knock down, drag out, War of the Roses kind of separation and stuff like that.
Good reference.
So, yeah.
Good movie.
I think we lead by just trying to do the right thing and trying to we focus every meeting is just how do we help, right? We don't, he mentioned earlier, we're not driven by the money side. The money comes. Or
how do you guys keep score?
What do you mean?
Well, so I'm not a money guy either. I do enjoy what we can do with money, but if you make something sound fun, I'm more than likely in.
Yeah.
If you said, hey, this will get you, I shouldn't say this because my boss listens to this, but I don't measure the success of something, but I'm not directly in sales, so it is a little different, but I'm not as money motivated. So if it's doing a good job or putting out a great podcast episode, that's exciting to me.
Yeah.
And that motivates me more than if you said, hey, well, another $500.
Right. I think
I'll take the 500 though, but I still the other one. So how do you guys keep score?
I mean, for me, it's, are we helping, right? Like, and are the people taking our advice? Now, I get it. That usually means that they're becoming a client and
Sure.
we're probably making money. But, when we make a recommendation, it's not just to fix something that's not broken. If they're doing fine, we will tell them, hey, you're doing fine. You don't really need us right now. Maybe we talk in a couple of years, right? But if they've got holes or, or worse, things that we know are going to create issues down the line, we want them to, I almost feel like we've done them a disservice if they don't become a client, right? Because I know that that's going to be a pitfall for them if they don't fix it.
Sure.
And so it becomes a little bit of a personal thing for us. Like, hey, look, like we've even had some clients where we're like, look, we get it. If you don't want to do it, if you don't do this with us, you need to do this with someone.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah,
because you've got a problem if you don't.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's kind of the approach that we always take. And more often than not, it works out in our benefit. But in terms of keeping score, it is about new household that's become clients, but it's more of a personal thing than a financial thing.
Because there's the money pays the bills, but what gets you out of bed and gets you excited to do your day is what you just said.
Right.
Well, and he closes them all.
And
There
I
you
think
go.
that's the thing.
So it's on him.
It's but I think man, it's the for my local clients when I walk in and to their house or they come to the office and I give them a hug. It's for the clients who text me on Thanksgiving, happy Thanksgiving to you and your family. It's that connection. That's the stuff that it's when we have a client that his daughter just got married in Italy. He sends me all the pictures from the wedding.
Nice.
It's that stuff.
Yeah.
That I think it's like, yeah, all right.
Yeah. It's not like we're working on government grant, no pun intended here, and it's all warm and fuzzies. But if you focus on those things that make you feel good, that's a measure of success, and the money follows that.
Yeah. Like last night we had almost all of my clients, and I learned this a long time ago when I was peddling life insurance door to door, right? I would always take a picture of every one when it was done. And because eventually the names would all meld together. But I'm a really good visual guy. So I would attach the picture. So when they called, I would, instead of saying, hey, Mr., this is Zar, I can help you. I'm like, hey, Stuart, what's going on? And they're like, that's my guy. Right?
That's smart.
So I stuck with that, So I called the clients, they're in my phone, and I pretty much know who they are. We have a lot of clients, but my brain works to where I can kind of remember everything we did. Last night we were at dinner, and one of our clients, there was a screw up with one of her policies. And then one of the clients, one of the carriers, were not supposed to draft from her bank account. And they drafted $18,000 from her bank account.
Oh, zoinks.
Right. So that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Right. So we got done with dinner. I called her up and I said, here's what's going on. And I had her on my phone. I knew exactly who she was. I knew exactly what had happened. So I called her up and she was like, all right, Zar, we'll talk on Monday. And she was fine. It was that level of trust, that keeping that score where it's like, it happened. But I know, it wasn't done out of malice or it wasn't done, it was something that went wrong. And you guys are going to fix it. And that level of trust, I think, is, the keeping the score part.
Do you guys, this popped into my head here, but federal employees, since they have such robust benefits and they're savers and they're maximizing that, is it mostly a play for, you're working with them retirement day? But is there much there, because most of what they're doing is going into the plans that they have.
Yeah.
And so it is you're working with them to the day that they retire, and then that's when the rubber really meets the road.
There's certainly some things you could do on the family side when they're a little bit younger, but they get a lot of life insurance for very little money when they're young. I think it's somewhere around 50, 55, that their 5-year basically renewable term policies is what they're in. And so every 5 years their rate goes up.
Oh, yeah.
And really it's around 50. It starts to double every 5 years. And so there is a little bit of an education side that we've got to go in, because we don't want to go in and say, hey, we need to replace a bunch of life insurance, right?
Sure.
But we need to replace a bunch of life insurance, because we go in there and we meet with them and like, hey, let me show you what's going to happen to your bill when you have your, you're 49. Next month you turn 50. Let me show you what's going to come out of your check next month, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a little bit of an education there. And then laying out the pension, whether it's the teachers or the federal employees, and we start to lay out, hey, this is your full benefit, or I like to call it the single life payout. And I explain what that means. Hey, if you are 5-6 years in retirement, get hit by a bus, your spouse is going to get nothing. And usually they're like, what do you mean nothing? Zero, right? So but don't worry, there's this other option, right? And then I show them the spousal options, but then I highlight the cost, right? Yep. And so, we've had multiple people that are like, well, I like the spousal option, but I don't like the cost, right? Well, okay, there are alternatives, right? And so that just starts the conversation of like, what to pick. And we have clients that ask us all the time, which one do I take? Well, that depends what else we do, right? Yeah. Because some of these households, I don't think they realize when they lose a pension, they're both retired, right? And one spouse passes, how much income falls off of that household's stream coming in, right? And in some cases, we've had several clients where the number falls like $9,000, $10,000, $11,000 a month in income just suddenly is gone.
Oof.
And especially if it's two federal employees and they try to take the single options to maximize it. It can be a lot of money that drops off. And if they don't have any life insurance, are you okay on 50% of what you had last month coming in?
Yeah.
Right?
But most of those people that it is closer to retirement. We do have some where it's like, at a certain age, they can move out a portion of it, but they haven't retired yet, So we'll, here's the game plan. Like Stuart said, we'll put together that. What do you want to accomplish with this thing? What's your vision of retirement when you finally get there? And then we can start gearing towards that, So, the majority of our people that we're talking to are within that 3 to 5 years or immediately. That sometimes they're proactive coming to a workshop. I'm still 5 years out. I want to find out how it works. But I would probably say 50% of those people is I'm thinking about going now, and I need to know what my options are.
How are you meeting these folks?
Different ways.
On the street,
what's your favorite way?
That's my favorite way. When they're dying for help. That's
there you go. That's the guy's line.
We have a couple of companies that put appointments on our calendar. We also do workshops. We've done some in-person ones. We've been doing virtual ones for the last couple of years as well. It's a myriad of different ways. I do quite a few. I probably run 35 to 40 intakes, or first appointments, we call them intakes, a week right now, which is why we kind of run our practice a little bit different, where I kind of do the numbers side and then he does kind of the closing and the paperwork side with folks. But and then referrals, right? Those are the kind of the main sources. But so we don't do a ton of our own marketing. We outsource a lot of that so that I can focus on what I'm good at. I started in the industry and did the whole networking for 80% of your time.
Oh, yeah.
I don't like that at all. I like being productive, and so we have a couple of different vendors that book appointments for us.
Do it for you.
Yeah.
Since you're doing virtual, so that means how far out have you expanded your footprint?
All across the country.
Alaska.
Yeah.
Nice.
We've actually, to be honest with you, we've actually had conversations with people that are not in the country.
Yeah.
They kind of get put on our calendar on accident because I think that they're stationed, if you will, in say, like their home port might be Maryland.
Sure.
But they're actually working at the embassy over in,
Dubai
or somewhere, and you're like, let's see, when are you coming back to Maryland? Right?
So when with that. With people like that, that's like an extreme snowbird almost example. Is any communication issues? I guess with virtual, it's kind of snuffed that out, hasn't it?
Yeah. I work a lot of hours, so I take my first appointment in the morning, usually at 8 a.m., and I've been known to do 8 or 9 p.m. Calls.
Get them out.
Usually if the ones that are overseas like that, they're pretty desperate to have a meeting, so they usually figure out when they can fit into a normal. Yeah.
What about? Does that mean how many states do you guys have to be appointed in?
I think right now 22.
Oh wow, there you go.
I mean, and we're adding all the time. I mean, usually I'll run the first meeting, and if there's some things that I think we're going to be able to help on, hey, we need to get this license, which thankfully is an easy process in most states. Now.
Well, that's all changed too, hasn't it?
Yeah. It used to be a whole.
It was funny because Missouri, we literally a couple of weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago, he calls me up and he said, "Hey, I've got this appointment with this lady in Missouri, blah blah blah," and I wasn't licensed in Missouri at the time, so it was like, all right. And I jumped on the morning at 9 o'clock, licensed, and I think about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it was approved and it was done. So
nice.
It's like, all right.
Hey, you mentioned before, that one area of differentiation is that you provide kind of a, did you say soft financial plan? I think soft. But have you guys ever kicked around the idea of charging? Because I know a lot of people charge for plans.
A lot of people do, but I actually use that as our leverage.
As a wedge point?
Yeah, because I've had multiple people that have been like, "Oh, this isn't you're not the first person we've talked to from a workshop or a benefits review, but everybody wants to charge us to give us all this information. How much are you going to charge us?" And I'm like, "I'm not going to charge you anything for the information." And they're like, "Okay, where do we send it?" So it's been an advantage for us. I mean, I realize that in retail, if you've ever run a business, you've got loss leader, stuff, right? And so that's kind of how we view it. Do we do a lot of work sometimes for people that we don't make as clients? Yes, but we've mentally kind of know that going into it,
sure.
Right? And that's why we do a heavier volume probably than most people in terms of talking to people and meeting with people. I will say you asked earlier about differentiating too, and this is another thing that we do to sort of helps us, right? So whether it's a workshop, in person, virtual, we sort of talk about. It's actually a question you asked Zar earlier about are federal employees special, right?
Yeah.
In some ways they can be. And I know that sounds a little ambiguity in there, but like there are certain positions, law enforcement officers, firefighters, air traffic controllers, that honestly have their own like bubble of rules. And
like the unwritten, like their codes.
Well, they're forced.
They are written codes.
Oh, they are written.
Yeah, they're written, but they're forced out of their careers by 57. So, and they actually can hit full retirement at 25 years and 50. And so the TSP, you have to be careful with that because if they go to a financial planner at 52, let's say, when they're retirement eligible, and that planner doesn't understand the rules of TSP, they're going to go, "Oh, it's just like a 401k. Let me roll it to an IRA." Well, you just hosed them. Because now they can't access that money until they're 59 and a half.
Oh, that's interesting.
And the TSP allows them, if they're retired, to access it depending on their position. Those LEOs can get them as early as 50. And a regular federal employee can get it as early as 55.
See, this is one of the things. When I was in practice, I thought I would dabble a little like in 401ks, and I quickly realized that you cannot be a tourist. You either are in or you're out. But if you're a tourist, you're going to F something up, and you could really cause harm. And then you also don't have the competitive advantage of wait, he didn't say what, and go from there. But so with the LEOs, do you guys get can you guys just speed at random?
No. I haven't tried that yet.
Do you guys drop a name?
So you would be surprised how many of the LEOs we work with are actually immigration officers. Like, sometimes I don't know where they are. Like, I just get their basic information, and I'm connecting with them, and they'll say, "Hey, I work for ICE," and I'm like, "Oh, you're in Texas," and then, they'll be like, I think one time they were in Georgia, and I was like, "Why are you lost?" But it is sort of funny how different states sort of dictates the different agencies we've seemingly have been working with. I mean, most of the law enforcement officers that we work with are usually in either Texas or DC, right, Northern Virginia. Whereas like VA people are all over the place, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're sometimes even you don't even know like where they are. And there's a lot of federal agencies like that just. I didn't know you guys were there,
Yeah.
Like we didn't want you to know we were there.
Back to that financial plan, not charging for it and stuff. I think you'll be surprised how many people will put together just a spreadsheet and show them how everything is going to play out at a certain time. And 6 months later, We'll get an email. We'll get a phone call that says, "Hey, I spoke to you guys 6 months ago. When can we get back on your calendar?" And we'll pick right back up, and eventually we'll earn them as a client.
Nice.
So it's not, it's like you said, it's a long play. We're not looking to jump in, jump out. Same thing with our clients. It's like, great, we'd love to earn your business right now, but we're going to be here, and we get clients all the time, like even stuff that we don't manage. Like we're not a big fan of pulling everything out of the TSP and throwing it into assets under management and pulling out what we need, simply because it's not, in our opinion, it's not the right thing to do. Right?
Yeah.
I want to say in our opinion, because we do know people who do that, and in their head they justify that, right? For us, simply because of cost, it doesn't make sense for us to do that for a client. But things like that, where a client appreciates that, because literally I've had clients ask me, "Why don't you take all of it?"
Yeah.
No, because if the roof blows off your house, you need something liquid.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that sets us apart, right? It's not all about, damn, if I don't close it, I'm not going to do anything for them.
I need it all.
Yeah, it's not that. And people feel that, I mean, they know that we're going into it with, how do we fix it? How do we help you fix this thing?
Let me. We're gonna land this plane here in just a second, but let me ask you. I got a couple quick questions for you. So one, do you find that I'm very curious about this because I've worked at different companies, and every company, even here, we have different sales teams. Every sales team has its own culture and personality. Mm-hmm. Do you find any different agencies that jive better with your personalities? Like, law enforcement. Maybe you guys are a little more. You are like a numbers by the book kind of guy. Is that natural? Is there like a natural you feel real comfortable with it? I mean, you had your 24. God bless your heart for having that that license. But you find yourself gravitating towards anyone, beekeepers or like law enforcement? The beekeeper thing is great.
Because he and I are polar opposites on this. I'm literally we sort of make it a joke in the second. So intakes, which are really just getting all the information, information gathering is me, and then second meetings, he and I run them together. So I present the numbers. Mm-hmm. But I literally tell him, I'm like, look, I'm the numbers, I'll literally say I'm the numbers dork here. Yeah. So I'm going to tell you what the math looks like. He's going to tell you if there's how to fix issues or answer some of the questions you might have that are more touchy-feely, right? So I don't really dodge around that. I'm pretty upfront about it. Yeah. Your analytical type do ask a lot more questions towards me. The touchy-feely type are more like, sometimes Zar will literally be like, "Hey, let me explain what Stuart just said." Right? Yeah. Like, let me put it in layman's terms, nice. Right?
So are you even in? Is there a third meeting, and are you in it?
No, he's not in the third meeting generally.
That's a nice. Yeah. That's what I was just when you said one, you're the intake, and then the two, and it's like, oh well, then this makes natural sense. Right. Okay, so one last question, and then we'll land this plane. So that's a lie. I got two. So one, what do you see? Big mistakes that you see people that try to enter this space make? Because you've got to see some people come in and just...
You said it, man.
A tourist?
Tourist, yeah. I think not understanding... Because I know for me is for the federal space, if I had to do the federal space by myself, I would be a tourist in it. When it comes to the products itself, I rock at that. And I think that's where we work well. But I think where people fail is getting, and you can spend all the money you want on leads, and you can do all that stuff, and you can have a lot of people sit in front of you. But the minute you start directing people in the wrong direction, like Stuart said, not knowing what you don't know, going in and moving somebody out from the TSP when they have access to their money, putting them into a 401k or into an annuity that turns into an IRA. Yeah. And all of a sudden you just took 7 years of accessibility off of the table for them, that goes around pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I would say, and we've had a lot of experience training new industry people in our backgrounds, and for me, it's intent. And I don't mean it as a bad way. I mean, people go leave a 9-to-5 job where they've got a salary and they try out this industry. It's commission only when they come in. Mm-hmm. I get it. They got to make sales to pay their bills, right? But clients can pick that up pretty quickly, right? And if you come in and you're just trying to fit a square peg in a round hole because you only have 3 appointments this week, you're not going to be in the industry very long. Yeah. And so we don't. I mean, again, we obviously we all need money, right? I mean, we would probably be sitting on a beach if we didn't, right? Yeah. So But we work off of just, I know the numbers. So I being a numbers guy, so it's volume for us. I make sure that I run enough appointments, that we will inherently get enough clients. And so I don't worry about, how that looks. We also are a little bit different in that we pay ourselves a salary. And so we're not like, you're not living commission check to commission check. And that was done intentionally to take off the pressure of, we've got to sell one this week to eat.
We had a guy, so I had a guy in the podcast, and he said this phrase, and I always think about it. He said, clients can smell sales breath.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Commission
it's just
breath.
Totally. Yeah, totally.
No, but that's in any industry, in anything that you do. If you're going into it with that, I need to make this, it's energy. People feel it, relax into it. Go do the right thing. I think on our website, we've got your income will be a direct result on what you do for people. So,
nice. Yeah. All right, that is a good spot. I have like a million more questions, but we're going to save them for the next time you're out here. Hopefully I can coax you back onto the podcast. So with that being said, guys, thanks. That was a great conversation.
Appreciate it.
The niche, again, if you're going to niche into something, if you're going to focus on an area, I think one of the key things we talked about is you need to live, breathe, and understand that marketplace. Otherwise, you could really do some harm. And if you really get down into the weeds, you can do a lot of good. So, Stuart, Zar, thanks for being on the podcast. Everybody else, you can catch the podcast wherever you like to consume podcasts. Special shout out to Diet Coke. We are sponsoring Diet Coke now, the Complete Advisor. But you can find us on Spotify, YouTube. We're on iHeartRadio, Pandora. We have our own channel. So if you get a chance, feel free to subscribe. Also drop a comment. I always would like to know what you what you have to say. And then also if there's any topics you want us to dive into. So that being said, we will see you on the next episode.
Cool. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Man.
Thanks, guys.